All over the world, people are talking about waking up to another level of consciousness. Many people say that they have found it helpful to view their mental health crisis as part of a painful journey to positive transformation. But what does this mean? What does it look like? And how does it happen?
I was trying so hard to fit into this mold in society, what was acceptable to mankind's standards. I really lost my way. I didn't even know who I was.
But for a long time, I was leading a double life. I was my academic self or my lawyer self, and then I was on the side doing all these spiritual exploration and finding my transpersonal community, and these things didn't really come together.
I internalized this message that to be different, to be artsy, to be creative, to think differently, like that this is scary and can end up with you being institutionalized for life. So there was that piece of me that's like, oh my God, I have to be normal and I can't, I'm going to Washington, D.C. and I'm going to be this person that's like an international diplomat and I'm going to, but just I had this vision of how my life was going to be, and it was going to be that I would never speak of any of this stuff.
Yeah.
I would walk as a passing amongst the normals, and that's how I was going to do it. I was not going to end up like her. But it's just I couldn't do it.
Basically, I was a businesswoman with an international career, and also started my own business. And just after a while, I started to have more and more questions. That is that all? And it has to be something else out there. And I felt like something was missing.
So from when I was a child, I always longed to know that there was something more. I was told that the material world, what we can see and touch, that's what reality was, and we could have faith in something beyond that. But that was all we could have, and that just wasn't enough for me. I read books, I tried meditation, I went to lots of workshops, but I never got beyond the pain of not knowing, which at times was really more like a kind of despair.
When we are unable to live an authentic life and be ourselves, it leads to a life of depression, anxiety, addictions, acting out, repression, and suicidal ideation. I'm familiar with all of those. That's how I've lived my life. That's how I've survived until now.
But when I look back on it, the thing that started it all off, and that first year where I was deeply, deeply depressed and unhappy, and it was a horrible place, and I would never want to go back to it. But on reflection, in a way, it was the best thing that ever happened to me as well, because it was that process of going through all of that that really helped me find meaning to my life as well. And it just awakened me, literally awakened me to things that I would never have given the time of day to before.
I was very involved in Christian spirituality. I would pray a lot, and as I was getting deeper and deeper in my prayer and meditation, I started to experience quite unusual things.
Walking down a dusty street in Rajasthan, I felt my consciousness crack open. It was discernible. My first thought was, oh, I've been conscious my whole life and I've never really been aware that I was conscious. Whoa, something's wrong with it. What do I do? Where do I go for that?
Of course, it was extremely powerful where it's physical sensations started at my feet and traveled through my body. And then I was, taken into this blissful field of light. And that's where it started. And it was incredible and beautiful. And I understood everything. I had so much gratitude, and I just kept saying thank you, thank you, thank you, and you know, just crying and I mean, there's just so much information that was coming inside me, and it was incredible.
Usually starts with a release of emotion, and then fears just drop away from me, tension goes away from my body, my voice becomes much deeper and more resonant, my hands become softer, almost like a child's hands, and after that seems to make way for something really special that comes through. It's the connection to my soul. Sometimes there's a sense that I'm slightly psychic. I can receive guidance, I can see what other people need sometimes, I can see what I need, I can feel within my own family the dynamics that are going on, which ones are healthy, what I can change, I feel more assertive, I feel more in my power.
I have the ability to feel what people feel, see things other people don't see, communicate with the dead, astral project, get messages that are real, know what people are thinking, know what people are feeling. That has allowed me the privilege of getting to know so many people in this life, and many people who are marginalized outside of our culture and society because they don't fit in.
I had huge mystical experiences. I would see saints and sages and beautiful beings, but I would also experience dark night of the soul, which could be scary. I had synchronicities, manifestations. Electronics always failed during an emergency. I experienced clairvoyance, clairsentience, and I consciously experienced my own death. I could see other dimensions, and I could see that time and space didn't exist. But most of all, I could see a higher consciousness in everything. I could see consciousness in a leaf to the point where I wouldn't step on it. I could see consciousness in a computer.
Seeing inside people's bodies, premonitions, telepathy, feeling deep oneness with all life, knowing people's issues without speaking to them, seeing the cosmos when I closed my eyes. My body would move into spontaneous yoga postures when I meditated, sensing how everything is connected, seeing images of all of human history running like a high-speed slideshow when I closed my eyes, seeing colours and geometric shapes, formulae, symbols behind my eyes when I meditate, flashbacks to past lives, seeing spirits, communicating with loved ones who've passed over, synchronicities, reading the energy of people even when I'm not physically with them, remote viewing, astral projection, and a deep knowing that none of this makes me special.
I was sitting there and I experienced an unconditional love in my life. This was the first time I felt that. A huge compassion towards everybody and everything in this world. And it lasts, I think, like 6-7 months. I was in this state, what Adyashanti says, a spiritual honeymoon. And then day by day it was fading away, and I found myself in the deepest, darkest night of the soul experience. I was deep down, I was in a no man's land, and I had nothing to grasp to or hold or relate to.
Literally in just one moment, so I was in this very kind of unstable state, trying to make sense of the world. Really just, I had epiphanies of feeling deep interconnectedness with the world, with other people, but at the same time feeling a deep sense of suffering, just really feeling it within my own being, and also an awareness of it in others that I hadn't really had noticed before, just the kind of existential turmoil and suffering that I think we all have to work through.
Yeah.
And it was just hitting me, and I was just in a real kind of shocked state. And then suddenly, literally within about a moment, it felt like essentially my whole construct of the world just kind of disintegrated, and I was just having this raw experience of existence, just like all, being bombarded by senses and light waves and sound waves, and not, but seeing beyond the constructs of all of that, just kind of having a very raw experience of the world. And it was at once extremely amazing and wonderful, and also absolutely terrifying, kind of all together, all wrapped up.
It kind of really catalyzed something in me, an incredibly beautiful experience when it first opened, and I was in 2 days of bliss. It was absolute, like a full body orgasmic experience. It was just incredible, and I thought, what is happening? In fact, it was probably get to the point where it got too intense, But then it was just like, wow. Everything looked sacred. People looked sacred. I was full of love, and it was an amazing experience. Then it started to slip down, and I've always questioned, well, that's what took me on a journey of self-awareness and discovery after I'd got through the experience, because it's a little bit like, I'll say a little bit like my ego was quite fragile, and when you have a powerful experience like that, it couldn't hold it. I mean, I was hanging on for a couple of years, about the best part of 2 years, to get through that process, with just all my repressed shadow experiences coming up, really quite horrible impulses, violent thoughts, extreme emotions, panic, all flooding up, and I had no sense of how to get through it.
There were times I felt so shattered that I thought I would never work again. I felt like an amoeba on the floor, like I had no boundaries left.
I felt like a leaf in a hurricane. I just had no orientation in space and time, and my reality had shifted. I was vulnerable, I was helpless, and I thought, am I dying? Am I going crazy?
All of a sudden I heard a voice, and I turned around thinking somebody must have just said that, but I was on a deserted beach in, a very cold spring. So I was mystified, but the voice that I heard said, become a healer. And so immediately I knew what that meant. It meant that I was a reincarnation of Buddha. And right away after that, I had another flash that I was also a reincarnation of Christ. And this is very, very, very naive, but it reflects my level of understanding of the nature of religion at that point in time for me. In my mind, Buddha had created a religion for the East, and Christ had created a religion for the West. And I was going to create my new mission as a reincarnation of them was to create a new religion that would be global. And it wouldn't be long before people would recognize kind of like this new religion and me as like a messiah for this new religion.
I lived in fantasy worlds as a young girl, and I'd, gone through a lot of trauma. And I just remember, like, before I came into this life, I remember what it was like. And I wanted to go back there. Like, it's very hard to describe, but I would sort of lay on the grass for hours and stare at the sky. And just have these, not even concrete memories, but just the visceral feeling of being in the spirit world. And the beauty of that. And I was like, what am I doing here in this this body? And why?
For me, it started with a car accident when I was 21, so several years ago now. And it was also the first time I'd experienced a dissociative state. So I sort of dissociated in the accident, and I didn't have a lot of memories from it. And I spent the better part of about 2 months or so, like, not really walking or doing much because I had shattered my pelvis and I broke my jaw and I had collapsed lung and torn liver and broke some teeth. It was, And it just it was about a 7-year recovery process. Like, I had chronic pain for about 7 years. And in that time, I really started feeling like I was losing touch with my sense of self. I was very young. I've since learned that was a critical developmental time for my brain. And so at such a young age and a developmental time, I'm going through this really intense trauma. And I started developing anxiety, and I was having a hard time just feeling like I fit in.
I was thrown out of a yacht while we were fishing. Another time I was hit by a freak wave on the beach. I had to scale a cliff to get out. There was also a time when I was ambushed by guerrillas with AK-47s. A bomb went off while I was getting into my car. I volunteered at the military hospital there, and that was obviously traumatic, seeing all the injuries. My businesses were attacked. 2 people were assassinated. Then I got followed by a stalker for 6 months and had a bodyguard with an M16 in the back seat for a while. I was extortioned. I think probably one of the more difficult things was being a caregiver to my husband, who had diabetes, and watching toe by toe and eventually his feet amputated. I call all of this my lasagna of trauma. Layers and layers and layers of events that I had to struggle through and come out on the other side.
I felt separated from my lower body. So I had the upper body part and my feet that were actually mine, but there were 2 parallel worlds.
Wow.
And one was living in kind of sort of a hell because I was feeling everything so profoundly. Every pain, I could feel the pain of everything. I know that I was saying, what's wrong with this world, because the things should not be like this. And I had a lot of anger upon this world, upon the world that what am I doing here? Growing up, this led me to a lot of suicidal thoughts. So when I was 15, because of the enormous pressure that was inside myself, and because of me not being able to understand from that perspective what's happening, I started cutting myself, self-inflicting injuries, because it was the only form of tension release for me. I had a lot of anger. I could absorb everyone's anger around me, and I was like, whoa, like a big mountain exploding.
But then they had a 5-minute meditation, just focus on your fear. And I didn't think I had any fear, but I focused, and then they said, imagine somebody's trying to kill you or kidnap you, and that didn't work for me. But all of a sudden, a memory of a scuba diving accident I had had just 2 months earlier, where I lost my weight belt about 30 meters below and went shooting into the surface, that came up. And then I felt this punch in my chest, and I started to cry, and I really started to feel this fear that I had completely blocked off.
It was like a dam that was just waiting to explode because I wasn't in touch with that side of myself at all.
I remember traveling in the car with my husband, and suddenly a huge rush of energy came through my hands and my feet. And I never felt energy before. And it lasted 3 days, and on the 3rd day, I was going through an experience. Later I understood it was a Kundalini awakening experience.
But for most of us, we're having these kind of Kundalini experiences, and we're going through hell because we don't have a cultural context for it. We don't know what it is. We don't know how to manage it. And this system seems to be trying to work through blockages that are in that bioenergetic system. It's like the Kundalini intelligence is trying to work through these blockages. And those blockages are caused by some sorts of trauma in the broadest sense of the word trauma.
Many people report how these experiences can become unmanageable and lead to the need for crisis support. They can be isolating, terrifying, confusing, and there can be a vital need for safety and understanding.
In terms of experiencing deep emptiness, deep bliss, deep peace, became out of control in a way that I started to lose my sense of who I was completely, and thought that maybe I died, or had a psychotic break, or was in a kind of manic episodes, because my moods and experiences would swing so much from really, really high to really, really low as well. So I was really scared at the time that those kind of experiences could be, pathologized, or I might end up having to, be in a mental institute for a while or something like that.
I experienced hearing voices and seeing spirits that were with people that other people didn't see. And I was labeled with mental illness. I was hospitalized on several occasions, and I was put on tons of different medication. The Western world, the medical world, didn't understand what was happening with me.
I would also start having visions. I would see angels and God and devil, and it became extremely intense to the point when I couldn't function anymore and I got very deeply depressed. And that's when I sought help in psychiatry. And soon after that I got diagnosed with mental illness. And because of it I was heavily medicated with antipsychotics, antidepressants, all possible pills out there really, and it got me very unhappy. My energy was very low and I lost 1 year of my life because I would just isolate myself. I wouldn't go out because I was so scared of what was going on with me and because it was so negatively labeled.
It would be possibly considered to be a psychedelic-induced psychotic disorder rather than schizophrenia. Or it could be considered a brief psychotic disorder. It doesn't meet all the criteria of the current DSM for schizophrenia, but it certainly would meet the criteria for some form of psychotic disorder. So I'm aware of that, and yet I'm also aware it was my spiritual awakening.
Now for me, when I had my spiritual emergence, a lot of it was extreme to the point of being diagnosable.
Yeah.
I had gone that route.
Yeah.
And I sought out different avenues of assistance because I wanted to understand what was happening to me, including meeting with a psychiatrist and having these discussions. And that really, unfortunately, the way I see it, if I had not known about my brother, if I had gone that route, it would have actually made me have a disorder that I didn't have. But because I knew the kind of damage that it could cause because of my brother's experience, I just refused to accept that.
Why is there so much fear around these experiences being labelled as mental illness? And what are the potential problems with doing this?
Yes, I've been through a spiritual awakening. I recognized it as such immediately. The hospital that I was taken to didn't quite recognize that as such. They drugged me heavily, even though I was very much willing to get help and sought it, and sort of abruptly took me from my home and traumatized me and my family. Spiritual awakenings shouldn't be a traumatizing or shameful event.
I felt like I could control time and space, and I felt the divine intelligence within me, giving me the gift of knowing and understanding the universe. I felt like I was a part of this universe. It was amazing and magical and sacred. When I got put in the hospital, I felt spiritually raped of being in touch with my soul. I felt so lost, and because the doctor diagnosed me without hearing my point of view, I had lost my voice.
Persons that experience any kind of violations of their rights and agencies, that's a trauma.
Yeah.
I mean, refugees or migrants that, I focus on primarily when they're going through that process, when they're in the camps, when they're rejected from society, when they're mistreated and not valued in their dignity, are traumatized.
When I picked up Groff's book, The Stormy Search for the Self, and I read about spiritual emergency, I was like, well, this is it. Everything that was in that book was what happened to me.
I did find people who did understand what I was going through and the way that I interpreted my experiences. I also discovered Stanislav Grof and his work, and I read a lot of his books. This really helped me to move forward. And I feel that now that process of integration is pretty much done. I feel on a daily basis connected to my soul, and I really trust that.
A psychologist who had been formerly a monk, he was in his 60s, in the 80s, had been a monk in India, a sort of a mendicant wandering around India. He'd been very close working with Krishnamurti, and a real knowledgeable person. He knew a lot about Jung and all sorts of manner of stuff. And over the 2 and a bit years that I saw him 3 times, and he gave me a gift, an absolute gift, because he said, he recognized what was happening. He said, Mick, if you can tolerate this, you're having an awakening, and you're going to have to, this is going to be something you're going to have to go through. And I think that his kindness was something that was really key for me, because actually being validated is one thing, but to be in a space with somebody who's just looking at you with genuine care and compassion and kindness, who isn't saying, I think you're ill or sick, who's saying, you know, treat this really carefully, but actually you're going to have to go through it. The only way is through.
When the 2nd anniversary of my spiritual emergence came, my husband finally asked me what happened. I was excited to share my point of view. After I explained my experience, as I just explained to you here, he questioned, I wonder if in the future they'll find out that bipolar disorder is the mind's way of coming to a new stage of enlightenment. This resonated with me on a deep, deep level. You see, the experience left me fundamentally transformed in a positive way. I felt like it was a puberty of the soul, a metamorphosis into a butterfly. Only the stigma, the shame from the stigma behind the mental health diagnosis kept my wings quite wet for some time.
I had to learn to deny my experience to the healthcare professionals, deny something that honestly you and I both know, really, if we're allowed to embrace those experiences, you know, embrace that near-death experience or that non-ordinary experience that someone else has and talk about it, that is the most incredible tool of healing.
This is very important to normalize experiences, to celebrate the value of them, and to give a voice to all the people like myself who experience things and go through challenges of trying to explain them to other people, finding community where we can share and navigate our journeys, and to bring forth the benefits of these experiences.
With guidance, it can be much more easier. The period of time can be shorter, because when you have someone beside you that understands you and validates you and say, oh, don't worry, you are okay, you're not losing everything, you're just transforming yourself and it will be okay. You can relax. Yeah. And the biggest transformation, it is when you are deeply relaxed and you just allow the process to happen.
I was very lucky in that I had friends who just let me crash with them. I hitchhiked back to Chicago and then back to the Boston area where I had friends. And for the next 2 months, I crashed on their living room couches. They fed me. I didn't work. I didn't have money. And so I never ended up in the streets. I never ended up hospitalized, medicated, and was able to go through this entire experience as an inner journey. That's how Joseph Campbell talks about it, as an inner hero's journey. And I was able to emerge at the other end 2 months later, kind of with both feet on the ground.
Now, all I needed around me was a sense of trust and people who got that what I was experiencing was actually a spiritual experience, but that maybe, there wasn't enough context or containment around me and within me to be able to deal with it effectively at the time.
What makes people not just happy but healthy as well is the quality of the human relationships they are having. And I think we keep talking about the peer support element of you know, when you're helping people, how important is that? The community and the relationships and how you are perceived by those people around you. Basically, I think they're just your life.
I had a lot of help. I mean, this is once I was able to find that community, that's right. So that's the number one thing. Once I was able to connect with people and find the different tools and methods, you know, meeting with a transpersonal psychologist, doing holotropic breath work, different methods, learning about it, reading about it, talking to people, connecting, experiencing, doing artwork when I needed to, whatever was available.
And I had a whole new budding relationship with nature, with yoga. I had an open dialogue with these voices. And I was able to get a sense of what was positive and what was negative for me. And I truly had to get to the point where I had faith and confidence in my abilities, and then realize that I wasn't crazy, but instead I just had a rare experience that not everybody could understand.
The first thing that needed to happen for me was I needed to get angry. Oh, like I had so much rage inside about what had been done to me and what had been done to my parents. And I didn't even know I could be angry about that. You know, like I had turned it inward into self-hatred and internalized stigma, or whatever the hell you want to call it, right? It was so important for me to get really angry, which is also not okay in the mental health system, right?
Luckily, I had journaled and painted and drew through the entire 4 months that I had been hospitalized 3 times. And I could go back into it and, over a few years, integrate these past traumas and thoughts and emotions.
While I was in that institution, separated from my nursing baby and my other 2 children and my husband, I was basically a mute for the first few days, just completely lost. But I was able to take an art therapy class, and that was sort of the way that all my senses sort of returned to me. And I was able to make this beautiful mask with different colored wools and paint. And we were supposed to make a mask that represented us. And what I ended up doing was making a mask that represented everyone in the world, because in my state, that's how I felt.
I myself questioned the authority of my psychiatrist, and so I was able to break out of the mental illness paradigm. So mystics right now, many of us are being treated as delusional or demonic. And then when we get put on these drugs, we're basically becoming prescription drug addicts. It takes a lot of hard work to overcome traumas and to emerge as butterflies, so to speak. I think we have to work on a multi-dimensional level, and there are many alternatives that can help people to break free, such as holotropic breath work and shamanic journeying, for instance.
None of what I say now, in terms of what I've experienced, is to blame anyone, but perhaps to point out that the system could be better. There could be some improvements to the system. Had some of it changed, and I actually received some shamanic assistance, some true, direct spiritual assistance from somebody who understands spiritual crisis. I maybe could have reduced some of the trauma.
And then I met a spiritual teacher of mine, who took me on a journey and told me that I wasn't sick, that I was actually a gifted person with gifts from my ancestral lineage, and that I had a calling to become a healer. And so now I am a Sangoma. I have turned those haunting voices into beautiful, gifted, angelic voices that are my guardians, that are guardians of others that I can tune into to help them in their daily lives.
My key to recovery was having the understanding from mentors and teachers and other people who were spiritually mature to know that what was happening to me was a spiritual awakening, and that I needed to embrace this and understand it and come to some kind of a congruent place with the voices that I was hearing. I did a lot of detox work with my body. I released a lot of toxic thoughts and toxins that had been buried in my cells and my tissues. I did regular therapeutic massage with intuitives. I did daily meditation. I had proper nutrition. I worked with Ayurvedic specialists. I had an understanding then through mentors of the spiritual realms. I learned to create my own sacred space around me. I really learned to live in a spiritual world, with a spiritual world around me. I developed safe relationships with the spirits and the voices that I was hearing.
It was acceptance there. It helped me accept what I was going through. Not label myself as being crazy or something, because that's a difficult part. When you're labeling yourself, you just go deeper into depression. For me, there, just contain, without judging it, without anything, but be present. I did not even need touches, or just be present there, and that's okay for me. The person that's holding the space for you, because that's what it is holding space for the other to manifest and to heal the wounds. It's the beacon of light, so you can dive inside that pain and you can come out.
And so I began a meditation practice, and I started with what is called Vipassana, or insight meditation, which is about following the breath, working on the level of thought, working on the level of physical sensations in the body, and just really building that really powerful mind, body, spirit connection, and learning to be with difficult emotions without feeling like push them away or fully just get engulfed by them, so that was huge. But it was really the loving kindness practice, or what is called metta meditation, caused me to have a huge opening around healing my past. That girl inside of me who wanted to die was still in there, and I had not befriended her. I didn't want to acknowledge her. I was like, I'm better now. I'm activism kicking in. I'm going to fight for this stuff. Fuck all of you. So I didn't want to acknowledge her, and so through the practice of loving kindness, that brings up all your stuff that you don't want, that you don't love. It's all this loving kindness. It's so lovely. No. It brings all your shit out like, woof. Oh yeah. And I just remember I had this moment where I just was in the hall. I got up, I left the hall, and just sat on this hill, and I just howled for her. I howled for the pain that this girl felt, and was able to befriend her. And that changed everything.
So I ended up meditating like my hair is on fire. Basically, I just became extremely diligent. I had to make peace with these deeper truths that began to unfold in my work, essentially really, really seeing the interconnected and permanent nature of the world, and how the sense of ground and solidity and stability that I had taken for granted was actually really kind of an illusion, and I had to actually make peace with a much more deeper truth of the world as being far less kind of grounded and far more impermanent and unstable. And so I turned to my body. So actually, I was fortunate that I was able to resource myself because I had some really good resources. So I didn't have to go to the system. I didn't have to go on drugs. But nonetheless, it was still extremely terrifying for much of it. I was having panic attacks. I was having extremely wild belief systems within my mind that sometimes I mostly managed to keep an observing sort of witness to all of that. But sometimes I would get a bit lost in them. But mostly, a mindfulness practice helped me maintain a observing kind of presence for all of that, and bit by bit I made peace with it, worked through it, and kind of came through the other side recognizing that I'd actually gone through this profound healing process. And it was interesting because part of me the whole time, if I went online and went through Google, etc., I'd be like, okay, you have this brain disease, it's probably called schizophrenia or schizoaffective disorder or something like that. And I just was like, you know what, I can't even go there, because to think that there's something broken about my brain is just, I'm so fragile right now. It's just that's going to create a self-fulfilling process, essentially.
Yeah.
So I had to trust that there was a deep healing process, because I could feel that all this early turmoil and trauma was kind of emerging and flooding me, along with much more sort of transpersonal experiences. I could feel that my being was trying to heal that. I could feel that happening inside of me. And so I just said, okay, I need to trust this process.
I really think there are many of us who have experiences which may be incomprehensible at the time they happen, but which contain the possibility of deep transformational learning. They can help us go beyond the limited ways we have been taught to experience ourselves and the world.
People do come out of these states and they integrate on a better level, and their lives very often become better. Mine has. I have written a book about these experiences, and I see myself as a much happier person than I was before my crisis.
I've had a number of spiritual awakening experiences. These are really important to me. I feel they've guided me in my life. They've connected me to my soul and to something beyond what we can normally see.
And I prize the extreme states very highly. I value them. I think there is so much to be gained from these extreme states, that they put us face to face with parts of being a human that we don't experience otherwise. And if properly supported, we can gain a lot from them.
They're ultimately experiencing more happiness, more peace, more connection with all of life. So I'm really happy to emerge proud today and to share that with you all, to give you hope if you're in a similar experience. But actually, you know, the difficult experiences can be very temporary, and with a bit of support and guidance and grounding can become the most wonderful experience for your life, of actually waking up to more of who you really are.
I feel like the profound experiences that I've had of connection and harmony, and also challenging experiences of difficult visions and experiences, are all part of making me who I am, this profound sensitive being, open and aware of the preciousness of life.
What I find interesting about it is that although if I find that, you know, you have your initial breakdown and crisis, and at times it can seem pretty chaotic and pretty messy and a really bad place to be in, but for me, over the course of how it's developed over the last few years, it seems like the kind of state of mind and the place that I'm in now is a much more healthier place with a, you know, much more sense of well-being and contentment with life, and just a whole new perspective on everything. And so it's like, to me it seems strange, you know, that everyone would be trying to avoid and shut down all these kinds of processes that go on in people, because I have seen personally in my life that I'm in a much better place than I'm in a much better place now than I ever was before any of this all happened. So for that reason, I think there's great value in it.
I'm very thankful that I have been able to break out of the box of mental illness, and that I have emerged as a baby shaman. It's been a difficult path, and in Robert Frost's words, it's a path less traveled by, but it's made all the difference for me.
And basically, I found a new life purpose. I found a new life purpose to help others who are going through this experience, because there is a big opportunity in that process, a chance, an opportunity for a transformation. And that's one of the main reasons why I think to normalize these experiences are really crucial, because these people, we are the chance for a better world.
I wonder really how much of mental illness is truly just a spiritual awakening.
Are we all breaking down so that we can break through?
Evolution requires a series of chaos and order. And so in order for, when a current order or system is no longer working, it it doesn't just simply, do a nice clean transition to an adaptation to better order. It generally has to go through a process of kind of disintegration or chaos, falling apart, before it can reemerge into a more adaptive order. And so it's kind of this series of chaos followed by a more adaptive order, et cetera. And so I was looking at the state of the human species today, and there's no doubt we're in a state of extreme chaos at the moment. So, and if you look at madness like that as well, so when a person goes through a state of so-called madness or spiritual emergency, what's the whole worldview essentially kind of disintegrates, but then reintegrates in a more wholesome state.
So is a positive transformation possible for everyone who is going through crisis?
Not only is it possible, it's the most likely outcome with the right support. We developed such a pessimistic attitude towards extreme states in our culture, but I think it's mostly because of the way we treat people going through those extreme states. If we really offer proper support, the wisdom's there. The being is already moving in the right direction.
It's important for mental health professionals to hear our stories of recovery and misdiagnosis, and for people experiencing distress and confusion to know that there is hope and that these are normal human experiences.
This is very important to normalize experiences, to celebrate the value of them, and to give a voice to all the people like myself who experience things and go through challenges of trying to explain them to other people, finding community where we can share and navigate our journeys, and to bring forth the benefits of these experiences, because they're only going to benefit the world. And it's important that each one of us that undergoes these experiences take steps to make sure that it becomes easier and easier for people to bring about changes and the boon of our experiences.
I think the biggest thing is this very powerful and subversive knowledge that we can heal ourselves. And not that this has to be done in isolation. Of course, I believe in all the support and all the community as part of that, but that we have the ability to heal ourselves. We don't need outside authorities to tell us what to do. We don't need that. We don't need to depend on external conditions or substances to heal. That we have the capacity through what, and it looks different for every single person. I just want people to know that you have this power, you have this capacity, despite what you have been told, and despite all the lies that have been told to you. And I feel like if people really knew that and had permission to discover what that looks like for them, we would have a completely different world. Of people who are empowered and connected on a mind, body, spirit level and to one another.
Spiritual emergencies are one of the key phenomena of our age. They are not only signs of the times, signals of the discomfort of our age, like every age has had in the past, but they are also a signal of something changing in the human evolution. Yes, there are so many signals that we are facing a major anthropological shift by a widespread discomfort, a pervasive malaise in which at last something it's making its room, something is coming through.
It's about changing the systems in order to have governments take responsibility and invest resources to change the laws and be able to accommodate and give more agency and rights to individuals that are experiencing all kinds of disability, including mental disability. It depends how you frame it, right? The framing.
All around the world, people go through noticeably similar experiences. It seems to be the interpretation of them that makes a profound difference to the outcome. Imagine how beautiful the process could be and the knock-on effect for the world if the trauma of pathologizing potentially transformative experiences did not exist.
We have to discover ourselves as part of a wisdom that reaches beyond our modern Western worldview, and part of a love that binds all of us and is deeply healing for us and for our society. Our world and our survival may actually depend on it.
Flowers die, the seeds are buried in the ground.